Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me here. Do you want?
I'm
so sorry.
Introduce you.
All right. Okay.
Larissa Myaskovsky. Thanks for coming. I'm Jill McDonald, and Dr. Myaskovsky has come all the way from UNM. She is the Associate Director of the Core for Professional Development and Mentoring, which is part of the Mountain West CTRIN initiative that most of you are familiar with. She's also an Associate Professor of Medicine, and she directs the Center for Healthcare Equity and Kidney Disease at UNM. Before UNM, she was at the University of Pittsburgh. Before that, it was the VA. She's been involved in mentoring and committed to mentoring all throughout. She completed a prestigious fellowship with the NIH, part of the National Research Mentoring Program. She got an award for her efforts in mentoring, and so we're really happy to have her perspective on mentoring needs and mentee relationships today.
Thank you so much. That was a very kind introduction, and I appreciate being here and being invited to talk with you all about this, because in addition to the science and healthcare equity research that I really love doing, research mentorship is very important to me, and helping learners and fellows and junior faculty make the most of their careers and then be good mentors themselves is very important to me. So I really appreciate you inviting me and giving me the opportunity to do that. So what I'm going to do is stand here just so I'm cued by what what's coming up next. I'm not looking up as much. This is not advanced. Oh wait. It was working for us a minute ago. I will, It's not letting me advance on the keyboard either. Oh wait, maybe I need to use this. There we go.
And maybe try it now, see if it works.
Yep. So, sorry, Beth, we did test it before. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background in training and how that kind of influenced the work I'm doing now. I'm going to give you a little intro about my former and current mentees, and then talk about enhancing mentoring relationships and mentoring pearls. This is the piece that Charlotte and Jill saw that I presented at the annual Mountain West CTRIN meeting, that often I talk about with trainees and fellows, but also with junior faculty, because I think these are important things to think about, both in terms of your career development as a student and a trainee, but also as a faculty member. So my bachelor's is in psychology and women's studies from UCLA. So that often creeps into a lot of the work I do, especially because I continued with experimental psychology at Cal State Northridge, and then my PhD was in social psychology at the University of Pittsburgh. Once I got to the University of Pittsburgh and completed my PhD, I was very interested in moving away from traditional psychology, which is very academic, very lab-oriented type of research, and move into more kind of applied work, because my goals from a young age, especially growing up in Los Angeles and having psychology and women's studies, is to do activism research, which is research that does some good for the community or the society, that it's not just ivory tower research that gets published and no one can do anything about. And so that was a kind of a philosophy of goal that was established in my work from UCLA, from the excellent professors I had there, and it continued in the kinds of questions and work that I was interested in doing throughout my master's and into my PhD. Again, social psychology was very lab oriented. I wasn't able to ask the kind of question that I wanted, and so when I was looking for postdoctoral training, I worked with a mentor who was also a social psychologist in her PhD, but ran as a clinical epi as well. And during that time is when I kind of moved into learning more about healthcare, and health equity was just a new topic, if you will, a new topic in NIH-funded research. It was around 2002. Unequal treatment was just published in 2001. That was the large report that talked about healthcare inequity in healthcare and health outcomes. And it was a very seminal kind of publication that brought to the forefront all the health equities. It was federally funded, large scale kind of summary of research on health equity and healthcare disparity. And what was important is it brought together theoretical underpinnings that we know from social sciences like social psychology and sociology, and how that's involved in patient decision-making, provider decision-making, the patient-provider interaction, and healthcare decision-making and outcomes. And so as a result, I would say that was a very lucky time for me to be in a postdoc where I was really interested in kind of applying what I learned in social psychology and intergroup relations on health care disparity and health equity. So as a result, once I finished that clinical epi fellowship, I was recruited by the VA to do a fellowship in health services research. I didn't even know the term existed when I was recruited for this fellowship. Really, the VA just had a new, I think maybe 2-year-old Center for Health Equity Research and Promotion. And it was a center that was started by the University of Pittsburgh and Penn. So it was in Philadelphia. So it's 2 sister sites that applied for this large-scale center grant to open a center of excellence in health disparities and health equity. And they were looking for junior faculty. So they recruited me with this fellowship, and it was a way to give me protected time to write pilot and career development award and start doing health equity research. Up until that time, most of the research I did was using the social psychology theoretical training that I got, and then learning clinical epi in my postdoc. But this health services research gave me the opportunity to learn about patient, provider, and system levels of analysis, and I'll go through those slides in a minute, because it helped me to think about things, kind of basically applying social psychology, which is how the individual perceives their world, and how the behavior of others, either the implied, the real, or perceived behavior of others influences the individual. That's general social, that's a summary of social psychology sentence. With clinical epi. And epi, well, you guys are all familiar with what epidemiology is, but what was really nice, because I didn't study epidemiology, was the consideration of various levels in a person's world and how they influence their health and their outcomes. And to me, this was very kind of critical, because it was clear from the unequal treatment report that it's not enough to just think about what the individual decides and what the provider decides, but there's so much level of beliefs in society and culture and policy that influence people's health, their health decisions, their health outcomes, and influences the way that the care provider treats them in a clinical setting. And the reason why it was clinical epidemiology is because all the work that I did in my training, and kind of the majority of my focus, is the application of epidemiology in the clinical setting. So specifically in healthcare systems, healthcare delivery, and healthcare related outcomes. And as described to you before, throughout this experience, because I had very positive and sometimes really painfully negative experiences with mentors that I had in graduate school, it motivated me to kind of try to do better, to learn from the great lessons I got from the really awesome mentors I had, and also kind of make sure that I don't repeat the mistakes of the really kind of mentors I had. And so mentorship and research and mentoring researchers, junior researchers, kind of became an important goal for me as I was going through graduate studies and also through postdoc. But then very recently, in my mid-career, I had the opportunity to apply for, was accepted for this fellowship. And that fellowship, I encourage you, if you're not familiar with Norman, to look at that, because there's a lot of opportunities both for mentees and for budding mentors and senior mentors to engage in these kinds of positive research relationships, where it's a kind of a community of mentees who want research mentorship and mentors who are really excited and willing to do that. Plus, there's this kind of meta training of mentorship. And that experience not only kind of connected me with a community of other scholars who are interested in mentoring, but also gave me the opportunity to learn about the university, the system, and to be able to be a more critical thinker when I go in and I argue with my chief or chair for certain support. It let me understand the other things that are going through her or his mind when they say yes or no, and it allowed me to negotiate better and think about things in a better, more informed way. So I encourage you to kind of look into it and explore it, because I thought it was a really wonderful opportunity. So as I mentioned, my work is in 3 areas of research: health services research, disparities in healthcare, and then quality improvement. As I continued on past my fellowship training at the VA, I was lucky enough to have a joint appointment. So I was at the University of Pittsburgh, where I conducted my NIH research and did a majority of my research teaching to students, but also I had a VA appointment. I continued a VA appointment up until the time I left Pittsburgh, and that allowed me to engage in kind of research with veterans to help those that really served our country and gave a lot of their health and well-being to serve our country. And to me, that was really important work, and it helped me learn a lot about quality improvement ideas that are within the healthcare system, and to think about hospitals, insurance, different kinds of things that we think about. In EPI, I think a lot of this stuff comes naturally, but to those of us who weren't trained from the beginning from epidemiology, we don't think about those things. But working in a system like the VA, what's really nice is that they have an electronic medical record that you can collect data from across the country. And those of you who appreciate stats, which I think is everyone in the room, knows that it's really hard to get national level data that you know, there's some, right, we know about BRFSS and other kinds of national data sets, but VA data, getting at the medical records and having free access to a large amount of data is really, really unusual. And for all the often negative press that the VA gets, they actually are at the cutting edge when it comes to improving electronic medical record information and data gathering, electronic forms of training and teaching, and also they are at the cutting edge when it comes to helping providing health care to veterans and patients that are in remote rural areas, in areas that don't have access to the large healthcare centers. And so a lot of that, I think, goes under noticed or unnoticed at all, but it was an amazing opportunity for me to work in an environment where my colleagues were in different parts of the country, but we had ease of communication as if they were down the hall. It might have not been face-to-face, but we were at the forefront of video conferencing, secure sharing of data in a way that the university sometimes needed to catch up on. And so that was really impressive, and I have only great things to say about my research experience. Granted, the federal government, there's all kinds of bureaucracy, there's always all kinds of paperwork, that's a given, but it was a very inspiring place to work. And as participants, because most of my data collection is primary data collection, as participants, veterans are so much better behaved. They always show up when they're scheduled. They're so kind and respectful, and they still have this kind of innate duty or sense of duty to serve that never goes away. And it was really an honor to work there. So I can't say enough good things about that experience as well. So just to kind of give you an idea of what health services research is and what the different kinds of things that you can study when you do health services research, we look at things like how social factors, financing system, organizational structures and processes, health technologies, and personal and behavioral characteristics influence access to healthcare, quality and cost of healthcare, and then health and well-being outcomes. So what's really neat about this approach is you do a lot of the stuff that you might do in community work and in general epi work, but the key is you're thinking about these things within the healthcare and health services delivery context. But what's neat about this is you get to incorporate all the variables that you may have studied in epidemiology and apply it in a healthcare hospital setting. And in this fluctuating time that we have with insurance coverage that we don't know what's happening, it's a really cool and exciting time to be a researcher, to think about these things and think about how we can better serve vulnerable people, vulnerable patients by changing how we deliver healthcare instead of always insisting on changing the behavior of the vulnerable individual. And I think that that's a critical piece that we should think about, is how is our system maintaining that vulnerability, and how can we change our system to address the needs of vulnerable patients wherever they are. So the different kinds of research domains that we study, that a health services researcher might study, includes the individual, families, organizations, institutions, communities, and populations. So I have colleagues that work in all these different levels, and my focus is on equity and disparities, but and I think when you're studying these kinds of issues, especially in New Mexico, equity and disparities is a given. It seems like in every health situation we're talking about. And so studying here in the state of New Mexico, when you think about any of these things, health equity and health disparities is always there. But where I come from in the East Coast, I have to keep reminding people about that this is an issue, because there's not as much of a understanding and focus. And then just to show you a little bit more about how I conceptualize disparities in health and healthcare, I mentioned that we look at patient, provider, and system factors, and we think about healthcare disparities and disparities in health outcomes. We also think about the environment, geography, poverty, segregation, social and cultural norms. The reason why I'm talking about all these things is just to give you an overview of the fact that by diversifying the kinds of things that I could potentially look at, I also, through time and training, diversified the kinds of folks that I can mentor. And what I liked about that is with each kind of stage of my graduate and training development, I made major shifts away from the work that I had been doing. And that can often be seen as a painful decision to make for trainees and for students and learners. And I think part of that has helped me to kind of ease them through that decision making. Often when I'm faced with young college students, they think there's one path, that's the path that they have to take. And they feel a sense of failure if they're not succeeding in that path. But over time, as you grow and mature and have different life experiences, that when one door closes, another door opens and things like that, and there's windows you can look at to let sun in and things like that. But I think that helping young learners or even graduate students, fellows, think through things and help them to see other options that they may have not considered has been like a key part of my mentoring, not just for the one-on-one research, helping them revise their papers, but to think broadly about what is their overall kind of life goal, what do they want to be doing, and will something that may have seemed like a failure at first, will that end that goal, or is there a way to meet that goal, but maybe in a different way? And I think that that's also tied in with this kind of health services work that I've been doing, that maybe this data that I collected at the system level kind of stuff, but I probably can publish it somewhere, but maybe researching this helps me to see that it's not at this level of analysis that I need to answer this question, but it's at the patient or provider level of analysis. And so I think that encouraging students to diversify their training and their knowledge, and then encouraging junior faculty to diversify their training and their experience not only helps them to be better thinkers and better ways and find better ways to answer their questions, but also over time helps them be better mentors as well. So these are some of my former mentees. They're folks at different levels of training throughout my time at Pitt. And what you'll see is I have college, this is all training that, this is all mentoring that I did once I was in my kind of faculty appointment within the University of Pittsburgh. Before going into the School of Medicine and doing kind of health services research, I was doing most of my mentoring and teaching as a graduate student in the psychology department. And our requirements at the University of Pittsburgh was if you didn't have research funding, which was often really hard to get, you had to be teaching. And so from day one, I was the TA in our intro stats course. And then I was TAing, undergraduate, everything from Psych 101 to advanced courses in human sexuality and women's studies and psychology and personality psychology, social psychology. So I had the opportunity first to TA and then to teach my own courses very early on in my graduate training. And as a result, I interacted with a variety of young students at that point. But then as I got into the School of Medicine, as a PhD in a department full of MDs, you can't usually fund yourself by being a clinician if you have no training in it. So what we do, and because we don't necessarily as PhDs teach in a classroom setting, because again, we're not trained in clinical care, PhD faculty in a School of Medicine department often mentor one-on-one. They teach research design, which I did as well, but they do a lot of one-on-one mentoring, helping students develop a research question, develop a design to answer that question, and then collect their data, deal with IRB, and then helping them analyze that data and write it up. And I've had the benefit of working with a variety of students, and a lot of the students who came to me to be their mentor knew that I focused on disparities in health equity. They were concerned about an issue that they saw maybe in the population that they're interested in. I had worked with folks in pediatric rheumatology, in nephrology, cardiology, so a variety of areas, social work, emergency medicine, and the uniting theme with all these folks was that they were interested in a disparity issue or health equity issue in their focused area. So what I needed to do, and this was actually really neat for me, is instead of teaching them content, I stepped out of my comfort zone. I learned about their content, but helped them think about health disparity and health equity questions. And that's a challenge I have for you as junior faculty, is to not only focus on what you think your kind of narrow area of expertise is and decide that you can't help or mentor anyone else who doesn't know this area. Actually, you have a lot of experiences that would be really helpful to learners and mentees. So these are some of my current mentees at Shtick at my Center for Healthcare Equity and Kidney Disease. Yuri Leva is, am I allowed to say that, an awesome biostatistician. She solves every problem and she's just really amazing. And she also has a really great innate need to serve. So she also goes out to high schools and junior high schools and encourages young students who may otherwise not pursue STEM fields. She goes and does this volunteer work where she teaches them about math and stats and all the possible jobs they could have after training in math and statistics, and does that kind of on her own. So that's really cool. Graham Ford is my graduate student. He's in the psychology department. Before, he also was kind of a non-traditional student. He already had a master's in divinity and was a practicing minister, but decided that wasn't really his passion, and decided to, as an adult with 2 kids and a wife, to go back to school while his wife works full time as a social worker within the VA in Albuquerque. And so he's a really Smart guy, very passionate about cancer and healthcare disparities research as well. And so I help him with his dissertation on cancer work, but he also helps us a lot in our center. We're writing a lot of papers to help him kind of build up his record of publications as a graduate student. And Sam Swift just started with us. He is our postdoc at shtick, and he also comes from a really interesting background where he was an undergrad, kind of not sure what he wanted to do, was an EMT for a few years, and then decided he wanted to go into epi. He got a master's in public health at UNM, and then just completed his PhD in epidemiology in Florida, and was really passionate about coming back to Albuquerque, to New Mexico, where he grew up. While he was a graduate student, he worked with the health department, and so he already has these amazing connections with our local pueblos and tribes because of the work he did in the health department. He's working on for graduate studies in Florida, and so we are so lucky to have this amazing team of folks that I get to mentor, but I benefit so much because our research really progresses, and we all work together as this great team, really publishing a lot of papers and getting a lot of abstracts out there for presentations, and it's really a joy to work with them. And I mentioned their background because as I'll tell you in a minute, I think people's background helps them think about the world in different ways, and they shouldn't try to discourage any of their background or any of their life lessons or life experiences and try to block them out and be this kind of stereotypic academic. Instead, those life experiences really should influence the way they think about the world, the way they think about their research questions, because it humanizes and personalizes in a way that will keep them passionate about their work in the face of all the no's and rejections that they'll get for publications and grants and other kinds of applications, because you get a lot more no's and yeses. And unless you're really passionate about the work that you're doing, all those no's can wear you down, even when you get the occasional yes. But if it's something you're passionate about, I think that's the motivation that keeps you going. And when it's something that you can tie into what you did in your past or how you grew up, then that is yet another thing to help motivate and keep our students interested in going forward in the face of no after no after no. These are some of my current faculty mentees, mostly assistant professors. I really enjoy teaching them. I'm not going to talk about each one of them, but you can see they also come from diverse areas. Some are in my area, in my division in nephrology, but the rest are in other areas in cancer research, medical anthropology, OB-GYN, pediatrics and nutrition. But the connecting theme again with all of these folks is they're interested in disparities. And it gives us both an opportunity in my relationships with them to learn about their area, as well as help them think about and refine their disparities and health equity kinds of questions. So I've been kind of alluding to these guiding principles as I think that are really important for faculty to think about. Often what I remember from having bad mentorship experiences is that my mentor did not assess my goals. And they were only interested in mentoring me in what they knew in one path. And if that conflicted with what were my goals, we never really shared our goals. And then what we had was a really difficult mentoring relationship. So one of the first things that I encourage junior faculty to do is assess the goals of your mentee and then help them accordingly. Understand the fact that not everyone wants to necessarily get a PhD. Not everyone necessarily wants to be, at a top university. Sometimes I've had to deal with this in my fellows that are already through their MD, that are kind of already maybe getting a master's, and they're so awesome scientifically that I know they can write an awesome KO1. They could have a great career as a clinician scientist or clinician researcher, but they really just want to deliver clinical care. They really want to be a physician. And when I say just, that's actually a pretty awesome thing that they're doing, caring for people, saving lives, all that kind of stuff. But But I think that it's important that we don't project what our goals for ourselves are on our mentees. Instead, think about what your mentee wants, what they want to be doing. Ask them, what is their goal? And then have a clean and critical discussion. How do we get you to that goal? And can you realistically get to that goal? So it's a lot of kind of soul searching, both for yourself and for your mentee, because you have to set realistic expectations. Someone who has a low GPA and not a lot of publication history is probably not going to get, or research, well, when they're undergrads, it's more like research experience or whatever. If they don't have good scores, they're probably not going to get into that Harvard grad if they want to, right? But they can set more realistic expectations based on who they are, what their goals are, and where they want to be. And so I think having a frank and honest, without making it mean, conversation about realistic goals and expectations is really important. And also, it saves a lot of time, energy, and stress if you're not pushing your mentee to go in the direction you think they should be going into, and that's really not what they want to be doing. And sometimes your mentee just wants to pass their course, and it's your job to say, okay, I'm going to go hands off, and I'm going to help you do what you need to do to pass your course. Instead of, I really think you need to get a master's and do this extra training. That would be great, and I have plenty of mentees who want to do that. But then I have others who just want to pass, or just want to graduate and get a job. And all of those are great life decisions that they need to make for themselves within their reality, within their life experience, without me trying to project what I think they should be doing. I will always stop and ask, do you think do you want to hear what I think you should be doing? Or do you want to just vent? Or do you want that kind of support? I'm happy to be as hands-on or hands-off as someone needs, but I try to really ask them, should I be more hands-on? Do you need me to push you? Do you need me to set more strict deadlines? Or are you okay kind of going at this on your own and just checking in with me when you have questions? But I really try to put it in their lap. And I try to verbalize everything. We know that communication is key in all kinds of relationships. And I think with mentoring, some of the biggest conflicts we run into is when we don't communicate enough what our goals are for our mentees, as well as what our mentees' goals are for themselves. And so I think that having those really frank and honest discussions, like, I really want to help you, you tell me how I can help you. Here are the things that I can do. Here's the time and space I have to be able to do those. Do you need all that, or would you rather have something else? And I think having that frank and honest kind of conversation is really important. The other thing I want to mention that I've alluded to already is that your experiences and life lessons are precious. And they're also very informative, especially for your mentees. Sometimes when folks are struggling with classes or messy data results or decisions about majors or training opportunities or grants applications, they're really at a point where they're thinking, if they don't do this, if they don't make this life decision right, then they're going to be failing. And it's really important for them to hear people's stories about failures and successes and how one succeeded from those or came through it. Because they see you as their mentor, as a success, as you reached your goal, you had your training, you have a job, you have a faculty appointment. So they see you as a success. And so sharing with them sometimes that you've struggled, or sometimes where you haven't made the best decision and wish you would have done something differently, those are really valuable and informative pieces of yourself that you could hopefully share with someone, and can really help make a difference, because it helps them see, oh, my struggle isn't any different than anyone else's. I can get to the other side and I can still be successful. And I think that's true for minor research issues, but also major life decisions. And the other thing that I think we talked about in one of our conversations, I found that as I get more senior, one of the things that I do is moderate what I say and the advice I give based on the level or the stage of the mentee's kind of training career. So I've often thought to myself, gosh, I really wish when I was an undergrad applying for graduate school, someone showed me how to better evaluate the faculty and whether they would be a good mentor or not. I was so naive as an undergrad when I was applying for graduate school. And it would have been really nice if someone said, hey, look at the publications of your potential mentors. If you don't see any with students, they might not be very good at helping their graduate students publish papers. That's a really cool insight that I would have never knew about as an undergrad, and I know I didn't. But then as a graduate student and as a postdoc and as a faculty member, I realized that that little critical piece of insight would have helped me avoid a lot of painful problems in my PhD program had I known that bit of insight. But sometimes we don't know our lessons until we're reflecting back on it. But it's such a small piece of information that could be really helpful. So when you're talking to a student, if you're at a loss for what to say or how to answer their question, maybe just think about, if I was sitting in their shoes right now, what's a good piece of information or an insight that I had? It might be something they already know, and then they'll say, but often it's something like, wow, that's really helpful. Thank you so much, right? And it could be something simple, it could be something complex. Sometimes you're helping them, decide whether they need linear or logistic regression, right, in their analyses. But sometimes it's like, what would I have really wanted to know at the time that I didn't, and I know now, and can I share that with them? So I try to do that. And then most importantly, I'd say, and if you didn't get it by now, I hope you did, mentoring really benefits your own research, right? I think more fulfilling mentoring experiences with your mentees, with your staff, with your students, leads to a happier group and more successful research projects. Those times where you have positive kinds of conversation with folks leads to that ability to kind of pull through the annoying analyses that you have to do over and over again, and the table that you have to redo all the p-values and over again, and the graphs you have to do because you realize, like we just did, we found 25 more subjects from data that we thought we finished collecting in 2014. Oh, they showed up because our survey team forgot to forward us their data, and we have to redo all the analyses in the paper. But I have this team that is kind of, we've got such a great relationship that they're like, that's okay, we can handle it. We have all the code, we just have to rerun it and update the table. And I think that kind of great rapport with your mentees leads to better research productivity. And often your mentees, I have mentees who come from all kinds of different areas and backgrounds with different kinds of their own expertise that help me think about issues and questions I would have never had the opportunity to do if I was just focused on my own kind of kidney transplant research. Instead, I've looked at cardiology, I've looked at pediatric emergency medicine, I've looked at a lot of issues I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. And guess what? I get to be a co-author on their publications because I'm helping them write their papers and their analyses or whatever. And then that makes me a more diverse candidate that is really good for tenure and promotion, right? Because part of what they want to see usually in tenure and promotion is not just expertise in your area, but how you've collaborated with others in their areas. And engaging in those mentoring relationships is a great way to increase your own volume of publication, as well as kind of fulfilling the needs of mentoring and doing diverse research, and often having different sources of grant funding or different kind of avenues of publication. So I'm kind of limited on time, but I have like the whole shtick that I do about mentoring pearls. I'll go over these really quickly, but I think these are things that I try to talk about with my mentees as much as my junior faculty that I mentor. These are really, I think, critical things, and some of my valuable life lessons and experiences, some that I did the right way, some that I wish I had done the right way, but I want to share them with you because I think they're very important in terms of both your learners and the folks that you mentor, as well as things that I encourage my junior faculty. First is to seek multiple mentors. When I was an undergrad, I had a really great mentor who I thought this is how it's supposed to be. It's like one person that can tell you everything about what you should do for your research and your life decisions and everything. And I was really lucky, but I quickly learned that that's not the case. Over my graduate experience, which had some positives and some negatives, I learned that it really is best to have multiple mentors, because there's a lot of, as you progress in your career and as you develop, things get more complicated, and a lot of different kinds of decisions need to be made with your professional development and your science. So some of the examples I have here is all the potential mentors you can have. It'll be great if it's all the same person, but it can't be. So you need substantive mentors that help you with the scientific content of your area. Colleague or peer mentors that help you with your kind of writing, that might read a draft for you, or that will be ready to be in an audience for some slides that you need to help, kind of perfect before your presentation. They also can serve as, I have it down here later, but so your colleague or peer mentor could also serve as someone who gives you upcoming experience advice. So someone who's maybe a year or two ahead of you that may have just gone through tenure promotion, or may have just given a talk that you haven't given before. Those kind of colleague peer mentor relationships are really great too. And you can serve as someone as a peer mentor in that way too. If you've already been through the process, help out your friend and share your CV with them or share your dossier with them to help them get a sense of what they have to do. Then you have your professional mentor, the one who gives you career development advice about when you're making decisions about which path you should choose. External mentor, someone from another university or at least another department who can give you a reality check about whether what's happening to you in your department is really as crazy as you think it is, or is that something that you should expect no matter where you go, whatever university setting you're in? Because I can promise you there's going to be those times where you really need that reality check, and it happens to everyone wherever they go. And there is crazy at every university, but sometimes you need to know, are you really being abused? Is this something that you need to bring up in the chain of command? Is this something that you need to report? Or is this something you should pretty much expect anywhere? And often an external mentor can help you with that kind of reality check. Senior mentors are awesome. The ones that give you that historical advice about this is how it's always been. For the past 30 years, we've had this crazy system in place for how we're reimbursing faculty education. And that's something that's not going to change. They give you this historical detail that can help fill in pieces of information about the environment you're in, especially like for me as a new faculty member at UNM, I've only been there 2 years, getting to know the system, which is so different from the University of Pittsburgh, getting to understand the relationships between North and South Campus, between the different divisions and departments. It's really great when you can speak with a senior person who has gone through it and been around longer. And then the Jiminy Cricket mentor that I like to talk about, I have a specific Jiminy Cricket mentor in mind a lot, who kind of talks to you about ethical considerations in your research, in your professional life decisions and stuff, who you're coming across a decision about maybe how to recruit participants for IRB, or a decision about whether to stay on this committee or not, that can help you think about things in an ethical way, because I'm hoping we all want to make ethical decisions in our professional careers. So respect mentors' time. This is one that I really try to enforce or encourage in my mentees, is that we really need to have open communication about our expectations and our deadlines. You need to tell me when something is due, but I also need to tell you how much time I'm going to need to review it, and you have to respect that. And if you don't give it to me within that time, I may or may not get to it. Great conversation. agree on lead time for draft reviews, like I said, prepare and plan an agenda for the meeting. I really ask my mentees to know ahead of time what they're going to talk about, and if all they're going to do is sit there and say, hey, how's it going? Don't waste my time or your time. Cancel the meeting. And that's okay, because I have 500 other things I needed to get into. You won't offend me if you cancel, even at the last minute sometimes, because I have 500 other things that I want to be doing. So asking them to prepare a plan or an agenda, even if it's like one item on the agenda, is a reasonable request because your time is important. And cancel the meeting if there's nothing to discuss. I warn my mentees, don't expect an immediate response, especially if you're going to email me evenings or weekends. I have a family, I have a life, and so does everyone else, right? So I might not get back to them. I think depending on the kind of question you ask, at least a 24-hour response cycle is reasonable. Always establish authorship protocol with your mentees. I think this is really important. This one is a tough one for mentees especially. They have a hard time asking faculty, and especially senior faculty, to be a first author on something. I try to push my mentees to ask me the questions, because you're in a friendly environment and we're going to build you up, and you're going to have to just have that authorship conversation with a co-author that might not be as friendly and welcoming, you know. So let's develop your thick skin now, so that you can have that authorship conversation, because those kinds of things, you know, unfortunately, I haven't come across that experience myself, but those kinds of things happen when students who've done a lot of work on a project get thrown off as a co-author because the senior author decides they don't have room for them or whatever. So I try to engage in that exercise and challenge them beyond their comfort zone to establish an authorship protocol. And remember to say thank you, because what we do for our mentees is a lot of work. They need to be grateful. They need to show gratitude. And I think I try to, I don't usually try to teach my own mentees, like, did you say please or thank you? But what especially not to me, I try to make sure to, if they're asking me for advice on with someone else, to have that courtesy. And certainly in a forum like this, anytime I have the opportunity, I try to encourage all learners, please remember to say thank you, because that kind of basic courtesy goes a long way. I try to encourage my mentees to set reasonable but not low expectations, like in this cartoon. Life is a lot easier the lower I keep everyone's expectations. Let's not do that, but I do try to encourage them to seek reasonable expectations. So a lot of things take way longer than you expect. And over the years, I've learned that that's true wherever you are, whatever institution, whether it's federal government, university, state schools, university set, it doesn't matter. It always takes longer than you expect. IRB approvals take longer, hiring staff takes longer, participant recruitment takes longer if you're doing primary data collection. Pilot data does not always provide a clear guide for what your next project should be. And become comfortable with rejection. There's going to be a lot more no. So these are things that I really try to help my students see. When I sometimes have medical students who only have a summer to do data collection. So we try to set a more reasonable project goal for them when they only have a summer. I have other students who have 4 years to do a research project, and then they can probably engage in more primary data collection. They might even be able to develop a quick measure if they can implement. But depending on the situation, again, it's a matter of reflecting what are the goals, what's our time limit, let's set reasonable expectations so that we can have a successful product at the end of your research time without you feeling like you've done all this hard work and you have nothing to show for it. I think time management is really important. I like to recommend that people schedule not only their life, but their days according to their priorities. Logging your time on different tasks is really important. Sometimes people don't realize how much time they spend on responding to email until they either time themselves responding to email or they turn it off, like the email notification, to work on a paper or project. And so logging your time on different tasks help you to reflect on whether you're scheduling your day according to your priority. Setting intermediate but really firm deadlines is really important. Instead of saying, I'm going to submit this R1 grant for the June deadline, that's really broad. Intermediate goals are, I'm going to finish the aims by the end of September. Then I'm going to work on the method by October. And then I'm going to have it for internal review by November so that I have time to revise a draft. So setting those intermediate goals instead of those big goals, I think is really important. And make sure that they're firm. Work on if you decided at the end of September you've got to finish your aims, stress about those aims like as if you were going to submit the grant at the end of that time. Because that puts the pressure on you to really perfect it and make a good draft. Block up time. And for me, writing in small increments, sometimes people block off the whole day and then it gets overwhelming because the small project that you're going to do stretches and fills the day. What I've found is a lot more useful is usually in everyone's day, they have about an hour that's in between meetings. And rather than setting up that hour to catch up on email, I block it off and give yourself, it's not going to happen for the full hour, but about 45 minutes of quality editing and writing time. And I think that's really critical so that even in a time when for me, like I have most of my week is really busy with back-to-back meetings, often mentoring meetings or data meetings or faculty meetings. And so I don't have much time to write, but even in those days, I'll take that 2 to 3 o'clock time between meetings to like edit either a paragraph or a sentence or a whole section of aims so that I feel like I'm constantly being productive on a daily basis instead of just maybe once a week or once a month. Also, I try to encourage people to eliminate guilt for taking a break. I work with a lot of type A people who are always focused on always doing something and then feel guilty when they take time off to go on a trip with their friends or family and to relax. And I think self-care is really important, and we often make ourselves feel guilty for taking time off, so let's not do that. But at the same time, I suggest you hold yourself accountable. And again, I say turn off email notifications. Those automatic email notifications, I find, maybe not everyone, but I find them incredibly distracting. So over the years, what I've done is try to expand the hours I give myself for writing and really only say, okay, email notifications between this and this time, or or catch up on email. And it's amazing how much more productive you can be without that little pop-up thing distracting you, like you've got another message or a ping telling you you've got another message, because that really can mess with your productivity. I like to talk about self-promotion a lot. A lot of the work that I do, as you notice by the folks that I've mentored a lot of women, and I think women in academia have a lot of interesting and different issues to face than men. And being a woman myself, it's sometimes easier to mentor on kind of women-focused issues, especially. I think self-promotion is a tough one for a lot of women because they think about it as self-arrogance or self-aggrandizement. I love that word. Instead, I think a lot of junior folks have this trouble. Men and women have a difficult time of sharing important accomplishments. So instead of talking about it as being conceited or arrogant, think about the fact that the people that you need to share information with about what your successes are incredibly busy, and they really can't possibly know all the wonderful things you've been doing. But it's really important that they do because they're your boss, and maybe you want to be thought of for that next review committee opportunity or some kind of leadership opportunity. And if your boss, your chief, or your chair doesn't know that you have an interest in something or that you've successfully completed a task, you're not going to be top of mind for assigning these important leadership opportunities. So sharing important information about your accomplishment is not necessarily being arrogant. It's informing a busy person about you as a potential candidate for opportunities in the future. And I think if you think about it that way, then you're not necessarily being arrogant or tooting your horn. It's something you need to do to put yourself in the position to be considered for other opportunities in the future. And then disseminating one's results or deliverables. These are all ways to think about engaging in self-promotion that's not that doesn't have a negative valence, right? That it's not arrogance, it's a way of, again, sharing those details and disseminating like really cool results in a quicker fashion. So I try to encourage that as well. This is a great one, to be open to serendipitous opportunity. This is what I try to do, and I try to teach my mentees also. Find a useful lesson from every activity that you do. So even if you're mentoring a really challenging person, even if it's someone who thinks that you have no idea what you're talking about, then it's an opportunity to increase your patience skills. It's an opportunity, if you have a challenging student who's really not understanding you, it's an opportunity to learn a different way of explaining your material to folks that have various challenges themselves. So if you can see a useful lesson from every activity, you can see it as an opportunity for your own self-improvement. I try to encourage my mentees to eliminate rigidity in their research and career goals, especially my junior faculty. Again, that vision that there's just like one perfect path that they need to take, and if they don't get that fellowship or they don't get that grant, they're failures. No, it's an opportunity to look for something else. I try to encourage my mentees and junior faculty to use conferences not just for presenting their results, but for networking opportunities and new kind of, again, serendipitous research opportunities. One of the coolest pieces of advice I got was from some random person who came up to me from a poster about like this idea that they had for their clinic, but it was like kind of their clinic was too small to do this, and I was like, this sounds amazing. Let's work on this together. And it became the kind of the kernel that became a really successful R01 that I had, and is now turning into a comparative effectiveness trial for another R01. So those conferences are not just about presenting your results, adding another line to your CV. They're really about being there, taking all of the networking opportunities to talk to people, learn about their research, listen to their ideas as much as talking about your own, because listening to their ideas can inspire new ideas in your own work. And then this one is kind of more so for the hospital setting, is listen for research ideas from your patients. It's kind of the root of the Corey movement, but it's also a way of the patient-centered outcomes research. But it's also a way for especially for clinician scientists to think about more useful and innovative ideas for their own research. So instead of trying to think about what you want your patients to be doing, that's never going to work. Listen to the needs of your patients. Listen to what they're struggling with, and think about how you can develop a solution in your research to help them with those things that they're struggling with, because those are going to be really well received and really inspiring. And listening to ideas from your patients means they're probably going to adhere to it better than what you think they should do. So that's some advice that I give to especially to my clinical trainees. And then I know this sounds really kind of, maybe sounds minor, but especially as I get older, and young people forget this because they can function with so much less sleep than us older folks. Make time for sleep, diet, and recreation. I think it's really important to get solid sleep for your physical and health functioning. And now, as more of a health services researcher, I know it's important to get sleep for your cognitive functioning and your physical functioning. So this is something that improves your health and longevity. Getting more sleep reduces stress and actually improves your productivity. exercising helps you to sleep better. So I encourage everyone to exercise on a daily basis. It's not just because I'm a health services researcher, but I think it helps you sleep better. It helps you deal with stress better. I have graduate students who I know aren't exercising, and I really try to encourage them even to do a little bit of walking or something. It's amazing how it not only helps you think through things, but it really helps you deal with stress in a productive way. And then healthy eating, balancing your diet, avoiding. I know it's easy to eat a lot of processed food, especially when you're a graduate student pressed for time. My go-to when I was a graduate student was the easy Kraft quesadilla. I'd pour some Tabasco sauce, from a cheap hunk of cheese and a tortilla, and that was my dinner. That was so not healthy, but it worked. So I really try to encourage, especially my graduate students. I was like, you guys have occasional pockets of time. Go to the grocery store, cook with your friends, use fresh fruits and vegetables as much as possible. I know it sounds really motherly, but I think it's really important. It's just as important for your overall well-being as it is for again, to be healthier, to feel less sluggish and do better thinking and more productive work. So I check in with them as much about, exercise. And actually my team, I encourage my research team, if there's a noontime yoga class, go for it. If you want to go running, go for it, because I don't care how much time they give up in the middle of the day, but what it means is in the hours before and after, and often when they need to stay later to finish something out, they're going to be more productive because they've dealt with their stress in the yoga class, or they've gone for a run and kind of whooshed off whatever negativity they had, and it really helps. And so I really try to encourage that in my team. And I think that's it. Okay. Thank you.
I know we're a little later than we want. So how do you decide who to take on as a mentee? Surely you can't take on everyone.
No, I think what I do is I have a frank conversation with them about what their needs are and what I so far have actually not turned away any mentees. But I have so in my situation, I don't have as many people necessarily asking me to be their mentor because I'm in more of a hospital environment, and so most of my mentees now are faculty. I don't think everyone is as ready to do the work as a mentee as I want of them. And that doesn't mean I want everyone to publish a paper, but I want everyone to have respect for my time, and I'll respect theirs. I do make that expectation of them having a plan for our meeting, and usually just kind of frankly and honestly sharing that kind of solves itself in terms of like those mentees that don't want to do all that naturally find someone else. But everyone else that does, I somehow manage to. So, but I think that's because we don't meet necessarily with I don't meet necessarily with all my mentees every week. I meet with some once a month, some every 2 weeks. And what we try to do is be flexible. Like if they have an upcoming paper or grant deadline, we meet more regularly. If we're working on a paper, sometimes we're meeting every couple of days if we need to really refine that paper and get it in. And I'm very lucky that I have the benefit of that flexibility in my schedule, that I can kind of vary that. But then I have others who are like, they're just fine. We meet once a month and we just do a check-in and whatever. So I think that flexibility helps, but also asserting my needs as a mentor with the potential mentee and saying this is what I'll expect from you really helps weed out the ones who aren't ready for that kind of.
So if you have a situation where someone will not sort of meet the agreement.
Yeah, and I very frank with them, to say, look, next time, either if you don't have something to discuss, please feel free to cancel the meeting, or I don't know. I think so. I say at the outset, whatever you set as your goal, I expect you to work hard on it. And if you're not ready to do that, then you may want to consider working with someone else. So I feel like I'm very straightforward and enough so, and then I try to give prompt and immediate feedback that's kind and respectful without being too accusatory. That I've never had to say I'm not going to be your mentor. I've had to say things like, I'm kind of disappointed that you haven't advanced to this deadline as you know, the way we agreed. How are you going to change that? You know, or I don't know if we're going to meet this deadline. We may need to alter our goals. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. Unfortunately, I've never had the situation where I actually had to turn someone away as their mentor. I focus on the immediate behavior or task at hand.
Okay, I have a question. What about junior faculty looking for a mentor? And is everything that you said in relation to this, does that apply to junior faculty need mentors? So
Right.
in some departments, they're assigned, sometimes that's a bit related, sometimes it's not. In our department, I'm not sure people feel free to walk around looking for another mentor.
Mm-hmm.
But so I guess my question is, but are you saying that we all should?
Yeah. I mean, so I've had the experience. So for instance, I was assigned, even though I was advanced as a new faculty member at UNM, I was assigned to a mentor who I just never met with, because not in a mentoring capacity, per se. I meet with him as a colleague, but I as soon as I met with him, like the first or second time, I kind of knew that our styles didn't jive, and I wasn't going to get anything out of it, and I was going to just be a burden on his time. And so I just kind of stopped meeting him. Stopped scheduling meetings for that purpose. So I don't know what are the procedures and policies here, but I've always, a lot of those things are kind of informal. Like, so I've had junior faculty come up to me and ask me if I could be their mentor, and I've had other faculty that I could just see really needed a mentor, and I just came up to them and I said, "Would you like to meet once a month? I think I can help you." Some have said no thanks, and some have said, "Sure, that's really nice. Let's do it." You know.
Are you of the opinion that everybody?
Absolutely, more than one.
Even the most
Yes, absolutely. Because you know what, those most senior people, they need to learn how to work with the variety of mentees they might have. They also need to talk about things that they might have not experienced before. And they also, and I have this as an example from my postdoc mentor, who to this day is a colleague. We still write papers and grants together. And she still seeks out advice from her junior faculty and colleagues about the papers that she's writing. She wants input on aims or response to reviewer comments. And it was from her example that I realized it doesn't matter what stage you're in, you still need a reality check. You still need like an opinion or a review of your aims or your slide or something. So why not maintain those mentoring? Maybe it's not called mentoring, but I still for me, my mentees mentor me about new technology and how to interact with younger people, because I'm coming to the point where I don't want to learn this new app on my phone. I don't even know how to learn to use my phone, and they show me how to do things, right? And so I think that they're giving me their advice. I mean, I could call it, I don't have to call it mentoring, but I think there's always the opportunity to learn and grow, and you're always faced with new incidents, new challenges and stuff, especially in an academic environment where your students change with every year. And you want to keep changing. You don't want to be stagnant. You're doing research by nature is discovering new things and new solutions. So you don't want to stay stagnant and try to put the same solution on every new problem. So I would say yes. In a very lengthy way.
I had kind of a similar comment because I've been in work environments where I didn't really have a mentor or anything like that, but I always felt comfortable just knocking on certain people's door to say, explain this to me, or what would you do in this situation, and that kind of stuff. Maybe vice versa. They would come. So it wasn't called a mentee relationship, I guess. Just being a good pal. Just being a friendly.
That's kind of what I refer to as a
colleague.
peer mentoring stuff. And
Yeah.
in my case, for instance, in my graduate studies, my PhD mentor was the one who was really difficult, and so I found a mentor at another university who was also a PhD mentor to her students, and I really saw and respected how she treated her students, and I just asked, is it okay if I email you or call you for advice every once in a while? And yeah, so that's what I did. And I think especially for our students, graduate students, they don't realize that that's something they can do. You should really encourage them to do that. But I would say the same thing for junior faculty. Encourage them to, if they don't necessarily have one at their university, in their topic area, or who's like them in one way or the other, then seek them out. Meet them at, again, network at conferences, meet them at conferences, establish a relationship, and then email them for advice. I bet you they get as much fulfillment and reward in helping you as you do in the advice that you get. Right? But again, I've had some really challenging undergrads when I was a graduate student at Pitt. And even those, I look back on it, it was like a lesson in growing patience, learning to deal with difficult students. I try to kind of get the lesson from it, learn the lesson, and use that into the next time I might have to work with a challenging student, and taking that experience and using that new painfully learned lesson into being able to do it better or easier the next time. Thank you. Why does it feel like it's still recording?